Happy Monday. Today is Monday, June the 21st, 2021, and today's daily Bible readings come to us from Psalm 119, 113 through 128, 1 Samuel 18, 6 through 30, and then Acts 27, 13 through 38. Or you could have read Psalm 65, Exodus 7, 14 through 24, and then Acts 27, 13 through 38. I'm going to take a look at Exodus today and talk about a river called denial. Anyway, this is a story about, because it's Exodus, about Pharaoh and Egypt and Israel being led out of Egypt by God's hand through his servant Moses, and also Aaron. Aaron plays a part in this story too. But the story starts off with the issue of following orders. Whether or not we realize that or not, it's not in this text, but you got to read this text and think about what happens first off in Exodus. Because at the beginning of Exodus, we're told, if you remember, because you've read Genesis, Genesis ends with the people of Israel, right, finding safety thanks to God's work in the life of Joseph in Egypt in the midst of a horrible, horrendous drought, right? But we're told at the beginning of this story that there was a new Pharaoh. Joseph had long died, and the Pharaoh that was ruling in Egypt didn't remember Joseph, didn't remember anything about all those covenants that were made, and just looked at the people of Israel, the children of Israel, the Hebrew people, as just labor that he could do with as he pleased. But he also looked around and realized that they were outnumbering than the regular Egyptian people, and so he decided they needed to be taken care of. And so his policy that he decided upon was to tell the midwives in Egypt that anytime they went to help a Hebrew woman deliver her child, that if they should immediately smother that child, especially if it's a boy child, they should just kill it immediately and upon delivery. Pharaoh's orders, right? To their credit, and God gives them credit for this too, the midwives realized that was a detestable thing to do, and they couldn't bring themselves to kill these children, these innocent children. And so they came up with a story. They were, it was a story about hardy women, and it's probably true because I'm sure the Hebrew women, they were out working every day, so they were probably pretty hardy. But when Pharaoh asked, hey, why do I keep seeing all these Hebrew children, these boys running around? The midwives were like, it's them, those Hebrew women, though, they're so strong. By the time we get there, they've already dropped the child and they're back out in the field working. And, we haven't been there at the time to do what you ordered us to. So sorry about that. So, Pharaoh, his first order, this order for infanticide, this order for genocide, so that he could maintain his power and his privilege and his authority, by killing off an entire generation of children, is foiled by the midwives with this story. And so he, it's interesting. He doesn't really argue with that, but he comes up with a new order because his deal is that he still wants to get rid of these people and control their population. So he issues another order, and he says that every boy, he just flat out says, every boy born to the Hebrews will be thrown into the Nile. And that's Exodus 1:22. Every boy that is born to the Hebrews you shall throw into the Nile. And that's the New Revised Standard Version's version of it. And so that's a problem. That's a big problem. The very river, which was the source of Egypt's very existence, right? This is the river, right, that gave life to Egypt, right? It's not like it's just like some, oh, that's a nice little creek. No, this is the thing that brought Egypt into existence. It's the whole reason Egypt could exist. It becomes a grave and a cover for the murder of these innocents. And life in Egypt goes on. They just, I don't know if it wasn't that didn't bother the Egyptians or they were just in denial about it, but life along the Nile went on. People went about their business. They watered the very grain that they ate. They satisfied the thirst of their flocks out of the river into which they had just thrown all these children. And they themselves drank deep out of this river. They drank deeply by its shores. And Pharaoh's daughter even bathes in these like filthy banks where countless children have been drowned, just secure and comfortable in her power. It literally has become a river of blood. And that brings us to this part of the story. I don't think it's just an accident that God chose to do this and chose this imagery. It says here that after Pharaoh had denied the call, these orders from God, and denied that they were God's people that God could do with as he pleased, God says to him, he said, I said, let my people go, but you haven't listened. So God strikes the waters of the Nile and they turned blood, even water that had already been drawn. This is the part about, water in vessels, right? Even water that had already been drawn and fed into canals and put into drinking vessels and stored up that wasn't immediately in the river at the time, even any water that had its origins in the Nile turns to blood. They couldn't water their crops. They couldn't water their livestock. They couldn't satisfy their own thirst from the river. There was blood throughout the entire land of Egypt, the text tells us. It became a fetid, stinking ditch that was running right through the heart of Egypt. There was no longer any way to deny it. But Pharaoh remained in denial. He just refused to acknowledge what was going on and refused to acknowledge his own household's involvement in it. Anyway, that's the DBR for today. Get out, enjoy the day. We'll be back tomorrow. Have a good one. Boop.